What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Antler Up Podcast. And Jim and I, we're back for this week, and we're going to dive into some different topics that we wrote down about that we want to chit-chat about, I guess. And last week, we talked about how we'll bring in talking about rest, different rests that we've used and have had our hands on maybe in other ways and all that type of stuff. And then we'll talk a little bit about weight, and we could tell that story finally, and stabilizer stuff. But then before we do that, though, I want to, Jim, I've been seeing the last couple of weeks, I saw a video come across like on a news thing. I've seen some articles get posted. I guess there's like a new bill to propose moving our opening rifle season opener back to Monday. And I'm usually not one to stir the pot a little bit, and you know, we have some friends that really want that movement back to Monday, and I totally understand both ways. But for me, man, it's I hope it really doesn't happen. And the only reason why for me is because even though certain school districts still give those days off, those Mondays, or it's a Monday, Tuesday, depending on the area, dude, this past year I had more individuals, students at the high school where they took their time off to, you know, they were sick to go deer hunting, which was awesome. That's the first time in a very long time that I've had that as a teacher. But if that happens, the school where I work, they go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They used to give off that Monday, which was great. But since they took that day away, as far as like giving that off, we won't get that back. Like, it won't happen like, hey, deer hunting's back to Monday. Like, the school's going to be like, okay, like they don't care. Like, they're, you know what I mean? That's not, I don't think, going back into account for being a day off. So, man, if that does happen, that's going to suck, just because then, you know, that's just one less day to be in the woods, or I lost my opening day then, basically. I know a lot of people were saying they don't like it because it brings in business to local things. Like, the thing that I guess that frustrates me, and I guess that frustrates about, you know, our world nowadays, it's just like, you don't have to partake in it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if you are dead red on that Monday opener, make Monday your opener. That's not a big deal. Do you know what I mean? Like, go do your normal camp things that you were wanting to do. I get, like, you may, if you've always gone on public land and maybe did different things as far as like setting up tree stands and all that jazz, people will be hunting that Saturday and Sunday. But at the same time, like, if you are on quote unquote private land and you have the ability to kind of, like, you still can do what you want to do, and make Monday your opener. So I don't know. It just, to me, that sucks, just because, like, I think about, you know, I don't know, my situation. I guess I'm being selfish with it.
Dude, this one hits home for me. I mean, obviously we were raised on the Monday opener. I mean, you see right behind me, I have a sign that says I live for opening day. And that's true. I mean, that reigns true for all game seasons. But in particularly the deer opener, you know, traditionally was always a Monday, and we would go to camp that Friday. You'd have the whole weekend to relax, prepare your stands, shoot your rifles in, have some more camaraderie and relaxation with your buddies and family members that you didn't really get to see very often throughout the year. And then, you know, come Monday, it was go time. And I definitely see that side of it. As a father now, you know, a regular standard working guy, I think that time-wise, the Saturday opener has been way better. I mean, let's just be honest. You know, we can capitalize on not having to burn vacation time. We're able to get out there and spend a couple extra days hunting that we don't have to, like, waste time from work and away from family. And to be honest with you, we are the type of hunters that do our due diligence all year long, with scouting, with stand prep, with weapon preparations and practice. We're not waiting till that last minute to just put it all together. And I think, honestly, that's a shame on the hunters that do that. However, I do understand the camaraderie side of that. So it's a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and I try not to, like, weigh one way or the other with it. I'm just speaking personally that the Saturday opener has enabled me to have more availability to hunt and enjoy that whole weekend full of hunting. And I'm still able to capitalize on the camaraderie side of it because I just plan a little bit better throughout the year.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know obviously we have our own camp now, but like, even like I said, like, my tradition was just going into my dad's and hanging out with him at the house and getting things ready, cleaning guns, but it wasn't like any lavish, going to a cabin, staying over, having 10 other guys come, you know what I mean? Like I didn't have that. So I think maybe that's also too part of me why I'm like, who gives a like, I don't want to say who cares. It's just like one of those things where it's like, man, now that's going to affect me. Like if finally something as a quote unquote educator where you're able to kind of feel good about going out on the weekends, right? Do you know what I mean? Like I saw a podcast where a guy said, if you want to be a good hunter and spend a lot of time in the woods, like don't be getting into education. And you know what I mean? Because we're only gifted so many days. It's that time frame and all that type of stuff. So it's like, hey, that's one piece of the gun season that kind of works for me. And if you take that away, then I'm back to like ground zero, and it just kind of sucks, like you said. And then you got to start using personal time, and you know what I mean. It's just like I said, I get both sides, but for me personally, I hope it doesn't go through, just because, like you said, man, I've thoroughly enjoyed that Saturday Sunday opener, because man, even this past year, those were the only 2 days that we got out. Like for me, like those were my only 2 rifle hunting days that I did. And I didn't have to take any personal time.
Yeah. 100%. I see both sides, but I hope for our sake it stays on that Saturday. It's just been a game changer with time. And
game changer.
But yeah, I know there's a lot of old timers out there and traditionalists that feel the opposite end. And like I said, I totally see that side of it. It's just I think that this has allowed us to become a little bit better hunters, because now we have to plan. It is a bit rushed of a weekend as compared to what it was. Like I see what they mean about the, taking that time to kind of set up camp and like just relax and then build into it. But, we just need to plan a little bit better for that now, because now we get more hunting time,
right?
So, but like you said, I mean, you could easily make that Monday still make that Monday your tradition. Maybe you lose out on some pressure or something because, guys are already out there for a couple of days. I get that. I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect answer for this or a perfect setup for everybody. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what what the hell am I trying to even say?
Transpires.
Yeah, there we go. I'm stupid. But dude, one last thing from last week's episode, we were talking about arrows and all that type of setup. I doctored up some. This is a 23. I can't get it to focus, but it's a boning Atlas vein. So just tinkering around, it's that same material as a blazer vein, and you don't need to prime it. I like kind of the profile on that sucker. Pretty cool, as well as like the height. So I think like steering a lighter arrow should be pretty decent. So I'm anxious to see when I get outside for distance to test it. So that was like one new thing from last week of talking arrows that I wanted to touch upon. That's a new vein that I might tinker with, see what happens.
I like it.
Yeah. All right, dude. Well, let's get into a little bit about rest and stuff. You put in work yesterday. You were
I set up quite a few bows yesterday.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
You got
I was
after
kind of in the zone. Sometimes you just like put music on, you pop a Zin, you just kind of get in that archery zone. So I had a couple bows set up. I set up Josh's Exalt 35. I set up my new Artis that came in. I reset up my Ethos. I still have to do a couple things to that yet. I just retuned the rest and stuff, and I have everything kind of exactly the way I want it, but now I'm going to go ahead and swap strings and cables on it now. So it's going to be a little bit of a retune, but for those of you that do your own bow maintenance at home, you'll understand what I mean. So
yeah.
And then I was playing with different weights. We should probably tell that story since we keep saying that.
All right.
You want me to go or you want to go? You tell your side and I'll tell my perspective.
Okay. So, all right. So we're looking at 2025 right now. With the podcast started in January of 2020, the YouTube channel started that fall of 19. That's when Antler Up kind of finally came to fruition, basically. And prior to that, obviously, like I grew up hunting my whole life, all that stuff, and time away from in college and as adult, I talked about it where there was a period where it was kind of like a dead period, right? I didn't have a bow just from working and all that type of stuff. And finally, once I got my full-time job over 10 years ago, as far as like the teaching side of things were concerned, 10 years ago, that's when I was like, you know what? I was coaching baseball and we made the playoffs, and you get an extra little stipend for playoff work, and we made it to the state semis. So I had a lot of extra stipend work, basically cash coming in. And I was like, I'm going to buy a new Hoyt, or I was just going to buy a new bow. And I was dead red on a Matthews at the time. It was like the Halon or whatever at that. And went to the archery shop and I ended up going with the Hoyt. And with that, I kind of started relearning, teaching myself the art of archery. And like anybody, who's the first person that pops up? Dudley.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, I had no clue who he was, and I saw all these educational videos, and I was like, wow, like, you know, these were really helpful. They helped me just with grip and just other things like that, like stuff that it wasn't just a grip it and rip it as a kid like I would used to do. So obviously, like, you know, like any fanboy does, like you kind of go down rabbit holes and you really support and do all that type of stuff. And Antler Up kind of came about a couple years after that, and it was like, wow, like, okay, this is like really neat. I learned how to fletch my own arrows and all that type of stuff. And so long story short, I sent John a hat, like our very first Antler Up hat. And like, I look back at this now and it's just so funny. And, you know, sent like what you do for the archery community is really awesome. Put, you know, blah, 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 blah.
Thanking him for getting you to where you are as far as like your techniques and stuff, and that you really appreciate the stuff that he was putting out.
Right. You know, so I was like, what, late 20s going into my 30s, all that type of stuff. And, you know, my dad and I were, you know, we're 2.5 hours apart, 3 hours apart, whatever it be. So it's not like I could be like, hey, Dad, what do you think of this? And go, you know, shoot with him. And like at that point in time too, like Dimitri and I, this was even before Dimitri and I started even like hanging out and shooting. So it was like kind of like you know, I was on my own basically. So it was neat. So I sent him that. I sent that message, and like, I don't know, what would it have been like 2 years later, maybe, or like a year later at Attack. I just walked up to him. I was like, hey, you know, introduced myself, and he was like, hey, I recognize that hat. Like, yeah, man, or like the logo. And he was like messing around with my camera, like having fun, and he was like kind of very personable. And
very Dudley. He was
very Dudley. What you would see, right?
Let me see that. Let me see that sucker.
Yeah, let me see that sucker. But then, like later on, like on that weekend, we ran into him a bunch.
Oh yeah,
right. Like, you know, he was out having a good time and like all that stuff. And again, totally fine. I was like, cool. And then we ended up ordering new hats,
new logo,
all that type of stuff. And so this was like the next year, right? Or no, because the next year would have been, it was the next year or something like that. We had new hats, new logo, all that type of stuff.
And that's when you had really catapulted the podcast and got involved with some of the other outfits, and like kind of things really grew quickly in that year transition.
Yeah, that year was a cool transition. Like we're doing stuff with like Black Rifle Coffee, you know, all this type of stuff, like people that he was associated with. Like we were doing a little bit of things for like PSE even, and so it was like kind of cool. And so we get up to the TAC event that next year, and it's the last time slot for the knock-on course, because we were like, you know what, let everybody go through.
Sure,
we'll do the last slot. Like we never did that time slot before, so we thought maybe that'd be good. So we shoot target 1. We shoot, was it the second one?
I think he was target 2 that year, up across that wide open.
Yeah,
it was like an old airport or something.
Yeah. So he had it was a bomb too. Wasn't it like
over 100 yards?
Yeah, over 100 yards. So I'm carrying these hats because I was like, hey, let's update them with 2 new colorway hats, or 2 or 3 or whatever it was. Like, all basically gave them like each colorway. And so I have the hats, and we're like approaching them, and then all of a sudden, you take it from here, because I kind of was like, what the.
So yeah, it's a group of us going up there. We're next in line, and we're the last group to go. And you know, if anybody that's been through these TAC events, you kind of bottleneck to Dudley on his shoot, because he takes his time and shoots and communicate and kind of like has a few minutes with everybody, kind of like a moment to shake his hand, take a picture, chat with them, shoot with them, right? So the group in front of us was this happened to be a 16-year-old girl's 16th birthday, and he was.
And at this point too, like what Jim was saying, I don't mean to cut you off, was he was bringing multiple groups together to shoot at this one target. Sure. Whereas like in years past, it was just that one-on-one group. Now this year he was like taking 3 groups at once. And I don't know if he did that because it was towards the end of the day or not. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he might have been trying to get just people in to get through the course to get done in time. But the 16-year-old girl's birthday, and she was with her dad, and he was filming it, doing his thing for social media and just making it like a really cool moment for them. And after they got done shooting, they were going to go up and get and retrieve the arrow. So that was the moment where we kind of moved up to kind of get ready to get in position for us to take aim and shoot after they retrieve their arrows and move forward. And John, and John's people kind of motioned us forward because that's what they do. And at that time, you were right in front of us, and you had the 2 hats, and you went up, hey John, like you kind of put your hand out like a handshake with the hats, and you were like, hey John, good to see you again. I just wanted to update you. And like before you could finish kind of what you were saying, he was just kind of like gave you this like wait, like almost like you were
Stern.
like a child,
He was,
almost like we would tell our children that are kind of like repeating us like daddy, 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 and we do that wait a minute, he kind of did one of those, and it was kind of like whoa, like maybe I truthfully believe that this was completely bad timing. John was probably smoked. He does that all the TAC events. He was there all day, all week long, and we were the last one. So he was probably just like, for one, fed up and done with just like hundreds of people, thousands of people. And in addition to the timing of the whole thing was bad. And it sucks because he's a guy that you look up to, and like you were just doing a nice thing and trying to just give him something, and you ended up still giving it to him, and he was like, oh well, thanks dude, and he was like a little bit nice after the fact, but it was just kind of that initial. So now it's like a running joke where we all, every time we say the word wait, regardless of what context it's in, we do that wait, kind of like the way John does it. So for anybody that hears that on the podcast going forward, that's where it came from. But we still love John and respect him for what he's done for us and done for the archery community. And we'll still see him out there on the course, whatever. And it is what it is. But I'm sure people have had good and bad encounters with all sorts of celebrities like that. And that's just what it is. You got to catch him at the right time. I've seen him down at the booth over the years where I chat with his wife. His wife would remember me because her and I would take like a picture every year. And it was actually funny because the one year I came over, I was like, hey, can I get a picture? And she turns to John. And John stands up like he's going to come out. He's like, sure, dude. I'm like, no, I just wanted a picture with her. And he was like, whoa, oh, okay, Shay, like did his whole Dudley thing. And so it was kind of like she remembered me from that because I wanted a picture with her, not with him.
Yeah.
And but yeah, they're a cool family. They do good things for everybody. It's just that was a little bit of a sour note on the encounters that we've had. But now people know.
Yeah, that's where the weight comes in and the funny aspect of things. Yeah, dude. So you were setting up all those bows, doing all that stuff, and you slapped on your bow as well as Josh's bow a different style rest that I used this past hunting season, but you guys haven't used probably in quite some time because we were using a limb-driven style rest for the last couple of years and on our last couple of bows. But this past hunting season, I used the QAD MX2 cable-driven rest on my Artist, and you guys did the same on your Artist as well as his Exalt. So what do you think about going back to that cable-driven style?
So for me, I haven't run a cable-driven since 2017. My last one was on a 2017 Hoyt Pro Defiant. I had one of the original QADs on there and loved it, did well for me. But then when I started to do more research on the limb driven and like the benefits of it and how you could time it better and how it will actually stabilize longer down the shaft than a standard drop away. That kind of stuff intrigued me. So as a tinker, I wanted to try it, and I had a ton of luck and I had a ton of success with not only the performance but like the reliability from the limb driven. So I just ran with it and been really happy with it. But recently, QAD has made some unbelievable changes, both in their micro tunability, but also their silencing system and the way that they integrate everything and keep everything tight and super light to the bow. So that intrigued me for a hunting setup.
Right.
Josh was the opposite. Josh ran QAD for years. Last year was his first year with the limb driven. He liked it. He's going to still keep it for another bow, but now he wanted to go back to the QAD for hunting and kind of all purposes. So, but anyway, yeah, so him and I both have the new QAD on there. We got the ones with like the Elite
logo on
courtesy on the Elite logo. I love the silencing features they put on here and like kind of like the rubber dampeners that are on there. It's super quiet. even when it's inside the cage and you rattle the arrow around to kind of give it that test. Once you put that little piece of felt on the bottom, everything else is kind of solid perfectly. I like that a lot. I like the micro tunability. I like that the Allen. This is a strictly from a tinker's standpoint or a bow mechanic standpoint, but all the Allen wrench areas are very accessible, no matter what bow you put them on. I put them on multiple bows now, and like I can get in there with my Allen wrench without any issue. And like a lot of times that becomes a problem based on how the rest is designed.
Dude, and it's become such a problem for some that the Epsilon from Hamsky has a version 2 out just for mainly that reason.
Yes. The other thing that they upgraded massively since the old QADs that I was running from years ago is that this little screw that you take out in here to pull out your rest cord, the rest cord slot and the screw to hold the whole mechanism in is actually in its own holes, when before you had to run it through the same one. So threading that through there, and people that have had them know exactly what I'm talking about. It was a freaking nightmare to try to get those through, and I'm sure people complained about it for so long that they finally developed something new. So that was awesome because it made, switching out the rest cord. I prefer a different type of material for my rest cord and a different color just for style. And same thing with Josh. So I took out the stock one that comes with it, and it was like literally 5 seconds to swap them out. That right there was awesome. So yeah, very happy with it so far. It tuned very easy. It comes out of the box straight down the middle, right at 0, right exactly a 13/16 from the riser to center. Yeah, and so far it seems bulletproof, but I'm gonna run it through the whole season and see how it pans out.
Yeah, I guess that's like the one main thing that I guess was always the knock on a cable driven was like that fine tuning side of things. And that's kind of like how you're saying, like some of those long distance, whether it's tack events and just like shooting, all that type of stuff, you want to be able to make sure your arrow is, hitting the marks. And yeah, and go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to just go back quick. Yeah, so the reason why I had originally switched back to the limb driven also is because when you tie a prusik knot on there, you're able to actually fine tune where exactly that launcher kind of lays and what angle it lays at, which is changing the timing of that rest quickly in the field. And it's not exactly perfect. It's not exactly like fine tuned like you'd be using like an Allen screw, because you can change that on those rests. You can change how the launcher kind of sits permanently. But if you want to make a quick adjustment in the field based off of what you're seeing aeroflight wise, you could do that quick with your pressing knot. So yeah, that was one of the other reasons why I had preferred originally the limb driven over the cable driven. But the other thing with the limb driven is that you have this long cable that sits off the bow now too, which can grab things. It's super bulletproof and easy to tie back in. Like even if you ripped it off in the field, you could essentially take a shoelace and put your rest back in business. That is a benefit with not having it tied into the serving. But at the same time, you have this big long piece of cord hanging off your bow that can grab things, and it did become cumbersome in a few instances where I was doing some spot and stock. So having everything more tight and compact to the bow, I think, is more of a benefit for the hunting side.
Yeah, and one aspect to that you and I were talking about the other day, what we liked about the cable driven was that like once you set up that tongue, you know what I mean, your arrow is right there in a hunting situation, right? So like it's not rattling around. You don't have to like as you're crawling or moving very slow, keep your finger on the arrow as you're kind of working through maybe some brush or whatnot. Obviously you still have to be cautious of like where your broadhead is and all that stuff, but when you're moving through it, it's not something that you have to think about. Whereas like if, when it's down on an angle on a limb driven, it's going to rattle. Whereas that one's already fixed, ready to rock and roll, and it's not going to really move that much.
Correct. Yeah. Even this year in New York, when I shot the buck on the ground, when I had first drawn back and had to let down on the ground, I actually had the rest. The arrow, as with the limb drivens, they have like, some of them come with those little like rubber channels that sit on the riser and well, mine actually popped out of that, which isn't a big deal. You can still draw back and it'll center itself.
Right.
But I didn't want to risk it de-knocking or some sort of issue. So I actually took my finger and had to like reset it back in there. And it was like, oh, it's something else to pay attention to instead of paying attention to the hunt. Right.
Right.
Those little things could be the things that change the game for you. So.
And then over the last couple of years, so like what's kind of I'm anxious to see what your thoughts are. I mean, like you said, Josh used that cable for so long. I'm anxious to see what your thoughts are going back to that and getting time behind that new bow and all that type of stuff. So, it's easy for us to chat about a limb driven. And between me, you, and Josh, and even Tom, I know has used Vapor Trail. I'm trying to think what's on Tim's Prime. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look.
Good question. I think his is cable. I think he's using a QAD.
Okay.
I'm almost certain.
So I know Tom and I have used the Vapor Trail Gen 7X. This is the one that was on my verdict last year. And what's the way I have it set up right now, I don't have this is the integrate a model, but like right here where that screw is, where my index finger is, right there, that's the piece that clamps on that makes it go to the bottom limb. And this one, the Gen 7X, because of the Elite and where they are with their cable guard, sometimes it doesn't fit flush that you could get that piece to go down, the rest cord to go to the bottom, so you have to tie it to the top. And actually, I just saw on the Hamsky Epsilon version 2, you could do the top limb as well. And maybe you could have done that with the previous models. I'm not 100% positive. You just always see the Hamskys run into the bottom, all that type of stuff. But I read, like, what's the new update on the version 2 Epsilon, and that kind of caught my eye. So again, it could be new, could not be new. I'm not 100% sure. But these Vapor Trails, like, once you and I started tinkering around with them, like, we really liked them. I know you didn't physically have one on your bow, but once we got it set up and like really secured, they're nice. And there's little features that are like really neat. Like they have that little level bubble on it and everything along those lines, so you could check certain things out. But the integrate model, again, it's nice. Look at that profile. Like that's pretty sick.
Yeah, it was pretty streamlined. And having that bubble there for a bow mechanic is nice, because I usually take my own level and make sure that the rest is level to the riser.
Right.
It now kind of made that faster.
Right. I'm excited though, because they just released, I don't think going to be in stores for at least until May, which kind of sucks. But that new Victor rest, I guess they're naming it. It's named after the guy that first created like a limb driven rest, Victor something. Because everybody's like, what the hell's with Victor? And that's why, which is kind of cool. But it's, you're going to still be able to do the top bottom limb for that. There's some little fine tuning things that there's like a wheel that you'd be able to adjust again, if you're changing arrows, diameters and all that stuff, like where the tongue is, like you're going to be able to really change that. And it's just like with your thumb, like on a wheel for all that type of stuff. So I'm anxious to see one, like in person. But it was funny though, how we were talking about when you were saying about going the monotonous of where to get your Allen key on some of the parts of it. That's the one thing about an Epsilon that drives me crazy, because on my Exalt, I had to make a change. I had to move it up. And with that, you have to like undo the 2 side screws and then loosen those up. And then from there do your twisted, the wheel on top, which you do it, but it should be a lot easier than that. And like now, I don't know what the exact new version of it is, but I know that's the key piece, is that like they made it a lot easier where they put it to get to, and to make that elevation change a lot easier. So, and it's all about evolving. I mean, that's where we're at, I think, in this day and age of all archery equipment. You know what I mean? Like you could sit there and say blank and blank made the same bow year after year, and all they changed was this. I mean, what else can they really do? I mean, Prime is the only company that really went out of the box with something totally different. I didn't shoot it, so I don't want to knock it. I mean, as far as aesthetics go, it's not my cup of tea, but it's kudos to them for trying something totally different.
Yeah, I mean, archery has come so far, and we are really splitting hairs with everything from rest to sights to just bows in general. I mean, so we're trying to squeak out every little bit of performance and upgrades that you can, but there's nothing wrong with stuff that you even had 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. You know what I mean? A lot of that stuff will work plenty fine. It'll kill deer. It'll shoot tens. You know what I mean? Like it's fine. There's just these minute changes that kind of make your life a little bit more convenient. Maybe add a little bit more of a performance to things, but yeah. Excited to try.
I never really had any issues with the cable going top or bottom limb. It didn't aesthetically or anything like that. Nothing really bothered me with that.
I was nervous about it because, like, when you run it to the bottom limb, you kind of have that taper.
Yeah.
that goes from the rest down like on an angle towards the limb. But when you're running it to the top based off of where it's coming from, it doesn't have quite as much of a taper. And I was worried about it interfering with like either the quiver or something on the outside there. And just having something in my peripheral there kind of made me a little, even though there's probably nothing wrong with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't really bother me. And then, dude, a lot of people went back to whisker biscuits this past year. I heard that a bunch on a couple different podcasts. Yeah, a couple guys were like,
I haven't heard that.
A couple guys were like, I just want to keep shit simple. I'm putting a whisker biscuit on, like for a hunting setup. Obviously not, you know.
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll. I mean, let it fly, baby. Whatever floats the boat. Yeah, that's
dude. If you're shooting out to only like 20, 30 yards maximum,
it's not...
whisker biscuit with today's equipment it'll kill deer plenty.
Yep. I just think it's funny where you see some, like, again, there's nothing wrong with that, and you could deck out however you want to deck it out. I just always like giggle when there's somebody's bought a $1,300 bow, a $350 sight, and then decent stabilizers, because stabilizers now are $80 for a cheaper one, basically. And then you got maybe a nice set of strings on there, and then you slap a whisker biscuit on there. And you're there's nothing wrong with it. It's just funny when you look at it that way.
I tell everybody that asks me or anybody that comes to my house to have stuff worked on, put your money in your rest and your sight. I don't care what bow you shoot. I don't care what model of bow you shoot or what level, what tier, if it's flagship or the cheap one, it doesn't matter. You put your money into your sight and your rest, and I promise you're going to be right with them.
Because, dude, like you've never owned an Epsilon.
No, I still refuse to pay the full price for an Epsilon.
Go ahead. Because I was going to say, like, you and I have both shot the Hybrid Hunter, which there's that one. That's the Everest. This is
the Everest, which is the step below the
Epsilon,
which I can't remember the price point difference in that, but I bet you it's close to $100 below. And then I have the Hybrid Hunter. This is my wife's bow, but this is the Hybrid Hunter.
Yep.
On that one. Okay. Which obviously she shoots, and I have one on two other bows sitting in the shop right now, and I have an extra one of those that I keep because they're so cheap. They're like under $150 at times, like depending if you're watching the sales. And they are bomb proof, and they shoot just as good as the Epsilons, all the top tier one, in my opinion. I've shot them for years. I hunted them with for years, and I keep an extra one of those in my little bow tackle box in case you run into a problem on a hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And my dad, he on his bow, he has the boat of the Trinity, Hamsky Trinity on there. I mean, he wanted to match, so that was like the only color at the time that like matched his Cypher bow was like they had a tan, and that thing is huge. I mean, it's a ball, like you said, bomb proof. It has all the micro adjustable features to it and all that stuff. But that thing is like a boat on.
And with that, if I can go back to my wife's bow for a minute, so. With the Hybrid Hunter, okay, remember this old little spring thing here? This used to be a failure on those, and then they got rid of those, and well, they still sell them. They didn't completely get rid of them, but they did move on the Everest. They moved to that limb dampener or the string dampener tension thing that works really well. But then they went to this hard tie point here. I forget what they call this. I apologize for getting some of this verbiage wrong, but this basically is a clamp that bolts fast to that little.
It's like a lever arm. It's like a lever arm.
Yeah, it's like a little lever arm that sticks out here, and but your cable weaves through that, and it's tied fast. So this is a fixed point to a fixed point. So there's no spring that could break or anything. This is like literally you could tug on this as hard as you want to. It's never going to break off, right? You could buy that piece, just this piece from Hamsky, and put that on one of those Hybrid Hunters, and it essentially becomes this rest. So you'll get rid of that entire spring situation, which I've done with most of them except for my wife's bow. And it's just bulletproof. I mean, yeah. So there are ways to be thrifty and kind of save some money and still have a top tier rest setup.
Right. What about that? Kind of like wraps up the whole rest thing. And like you said, I like what you said. If you're going to spend money anywhere, like on a piece of equipment, like check that rest out. I mean, that's the last thing that you want to have fail on you, and obviously then like work your way up to that site. I agree with you on that.
You guys that buy RX9s, the new Lift X, Bottomland, decked out things, the sweetest bow. on the planet, right? And then, like you said, they're throwing a whisker biscuit on there. They're throwing a trophy ridge 3-pin whatever sight on it with like no adjustability and stuff. So when they get into those like angled shots or tree stand shots, you really don't you don't have any third axis adjustment or even second axis adjustment for that matter. So who knows what kind of groupings you're going to get. You're just the money you put into that bow you're not going to get the performance out of it because you're held back by those other components.
Right.
When you can have those two massive items change the total outlook of how that bow performs. That's why you could take a cheap bow and put two really good parts on it and make that thing shoot with the flagship bows.
Right. Dude, that's the one aspect of like, I never understood. I remember a few years back when Black Gold came out with their whitetail sight, and it was like one that my dad was like interested in. I forget which Black Gold he ended up going with, but the original first edition of the whitetail sight that they released didn't have third axis adjustment on it. It's like you're calling it the whitetail, gearing towards whitetail hunters that hunt from an elevated position, but you don't offer a third axis adjustment on that. Like, but what? Like, I never understood that one because it was like a cheaper sight, and that's why they didn't offer that. You know what I mean?
And now some sites are coming out with first axis adjustment, which we talked about a little bit last night too, which is huge for especially these Picatinny mount bows, because a lot of times those Picatinny mounts might have a little bit of a variance in them. They're not exactly machined perfectly, and you'll notice when you mount your sight to that, the actual rail where your sight would slide on might be actually like tilted in or out a little bit. So you want to be able to plumb that with the riser itself to give you a perfect starting point.
Right. Yeah. So my hunting bow setup, I never really cared about stabilizing the weight. So I never really, I've always wanted to be, I guess I lie about that. I care about it to be a little bit more lighter. This past year on my Artis, I did run a back bar. That's the first time I ran a back bar on my hunting bow in quite some time. And I used the 10 and 8 stabilizer kit from Elite. I ran the 10 out front, I ran the 8 out back, and I did not adjust any of the actual 1 ounce weights on it that it came with. I just let it ride, and I got it balanced really well, and I enjoyed it. However, on my Elite Exalt, now I am shooting the 45 hunter class, which means I can move my sight, I can move the yardage on it. So I could, if it's a 37-yard shot, I could put my pin on 37. I don't have to guess all that type of stuff. However, being that it's a hunter class, you still can only run a 12-inch bar out front and a 12-inch bar coming from the back. So you got to be really peculiar about how you set up that and where you like the weight and the balance and all that stuff. So on my Exalt, I have 6 ounces out front, as far as like the single weights, and I have 16 ounces coming out the back. And the one piece, I know they're expensive. Do I think you could do it any other way and there's cheaper options? Yes, I do. However, those new Hamskea weight systems where you could just like how they're magnetic. Yeah. Man, those things are awesome. I'm really toying around the idea when I have saved up a couple extra dollars plus saved up a couple extra dollars on my on my Lancaster account where I could get like 50 off or something like that. I'm for sure going to buy another set to run on my Artis, I think. Even though I know I'm not going to run as much, like just the one kit, I just really like how easy they are to swap. And I don't know, I just really like
when you're shooting in, sighting in, it's nice to be able to just adjust that on the fly without having to take everything apart or unscrew everything. And you're putting on 1 ounce at a time. Now you could like really double, triple it up, whatever it is, and move things around front to back and like kind of get things set up way faster. But also like in a tournament setting, right? There's been many times where I'm like dropping my alarm. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I'm on my 50th shot of the day or whatever it is. And I need to like maybe take a few ounces off just to kind of get me steady again. Now you could do that without having to take your bow apart.
Yeah,
awesome. You could just do, so.
Yeah, and that's where I was even thinking about hopefully getting a set before TAC, because obviously I know I'll be shooting my Artis for TAC, but I want to have a little extra for balance. just to make it a little bit heavier. And then like what you just said. So if we shoot that first course and we go eat and it's hot maybe that day, and we go shoot that second course and my front arm is dipping or whichever way, I could hopefully just unscrew a weight or two from the front and drop it on the backside. Like it's that simple, that easy. Again, they're not cheap. I know that. But as far as like do
you have one with you? Can you show like the way it unsnaps quickly or no?
Yeah, I think I do. Give me 1 second. Yeah, give me 1 second.
Because some people may not have seen this before, so I want to make sure that for some of the guys that watch this on YouTube, they can actually physically see what this looks like, because it's pretty slick.
And I'm back. All right. So, and like, again, I bought these off Lancaster Archery, so it's not like we're sponsored or anything along those lines. So this is a Mountain Series AAE stabilizer. I'm a big fan of the thinner rods and and like with that, the look of that, but the way this weight works, the system works, is it's just you twist off. And some people might be like, "Oh, I'm a little worried about that," but like they're very like look at this.
Like, it has notches where it kind of like locks together.
Like that's not screwed in, but look at that. I'm tapping that's not coming off. So there's no worry in my mind like, "Oh man, this might fall off." But you just get it in the slot and then you just turn it, and that's all that is.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, like
Super
the base of it is a 1.5 ounce, and then I have one. So what do I got? I got 1.5, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5.5 ounces up front. I lied. I thought I had 6. But there's like an end cap. But again, if I wanted to add more of it, you just could buy either like a single 1 ounce of this, and then like right now these are fixed because I know for sure I like the 2 setup. And there is a Allen screw right here where my index finger is. And you tighten that down, and that fixes what you have on there. Does that make sense? So that I would have to loosen that screw, and then I could undo the magnet. So those are fixed, and I have the 1 ounce attached to the end cap on this one. Those are fixed. Those can't come off. So now I have like those 2 ounces that would go on here. I just twist, get them back in their slots, and we're good to go. Dude, they look cool. I wish the finish was maybe a little bit better. I'm anxious to see like this summer when I'm outside a lot more and putting it on the ground, because like these are the front ones and they are good. The back bar, the coloration is a little bit different. Like one's will like, and then the other one has a little bit lighter tint to it, which is. I mean, I don't really give a shit about that, but it's, if you're paying that much money, it should be. But yeah, I think it's a really cool system. I think for guys that are very serious, do 3D type stuff, that want like an end all be all, that like to tinker with the weight, man, that's a great thing to do. Like I've spent some money on doing different color ones last year. For my verdict, what's the name of the guy that makes those string stops for like mainly Prime? I forget his name, but what his company is. But he makes string stops mainly for Prime, but he also has his own stabilizer company. But he makes like really cool weights for that. And the way I have my 16 ounce configuration on the back end, I run a big 8 ounce one. So there's just like a big solid piece of this, and it's an 8 ounce. And then I run a 4 ounce right off of that. And then from there, it's all these little singles. And that brings me literally to like just under 12 inches away from the bow in the back. So it's like, that's as much as I could configure right now without it being abundant, basically.
Yeah, I like what you said about it being like an end all be all type setup, because now guys that want to run 3D, maybe you have 2 bows, let's say, maybe even 2 different hunting setups, or a 3D and a hunting setup or whatever, like a lot of us do. You could now just run the same weights from one setup to the next. You don't need to buy 2 different sets like we've had to do for years, and just and swap bars all the time and whatever. Now you could just literally just pop the weights off and pop them off. You kind of know the numbers of what you normally would like to run on each one. Right. It's super quick and easy.
Because like even on my Era, I bought I think it's the 8 ounce or 6 ounce. It's a fixed weight though. Like it doesn't come apart. It tapers, which is nice to it, but that's all it is. You know what I mean? I couldn't if I was like, oh man, I just would love to take 2 ounces off of that, like for where it's at type of ordeal. I wouldn't be able to. Whereas with this system, you can easily. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I'm a big fan of them. I think it's a really cool piece. Again, just something that maybe sometimes is overlooked by people with how they like their bow balanced. I mean, dude, nothing beats it when you pull a bow back and you are as steady as you can at full draw, and that bow just balances nice. You're not trying to, you know what I mean? Like I never
helps
really
the target panic too, because now your pin's not floating all over creation.
Oh my
you
God,
just have that real tight little movement.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference.
Dude, that's a good leeway into next podcast that we're going to do. We're going to talk about how you helped me overcome that. And I think we'll talk about releases, but a little bit of the training, because I think right now, I mean, obviously some people are gearing up for outdoor stuff, but it's a way also we could talk about what I've done to help my little scatterbrain, I think, and kind of go from there. What do you think? That'd be a good topic.
It. Yeah, we'll definitely talk releases. We'll talk, how we utilize those releases both for hunting and 3D, overcoming like injuries and things like that, and kind of using releases. And there's a lot to be said in that category as well.
Yeah, we'll dive into that. I think that'll be good. And then we could obviously piece about different bows, different sites that we'll get into in some future episodes as well. But man, these conversations have been fun, dude. I'm really enjoying this.
Super easy.
Yeah, and they're super easy. I'm loving the feedback so far. From some of our listeners, from our friends, they really like this setup. And like I said, we'll rock it here for quite some time until we try some different. I know we do have an episode coming up. I got Preston Ward on the horn. We're going to record with him next week, and I'm excited to have Preston on the podcast again, because, right now, like, dude, this will be up your alley, man, because obviously you've made some life changes as far as your physical fitness and health is concerned, and Preston being in what he does as far as keeping people in that injury preventative state of mind, and or if you already have an injury, what can you do to better yourself? And Preston works with some of the high-end people in the hunting world to keep them healthy and out on the mountain and on their hunt a lot longer and feel good. So I'm excited to talk shop with him, and he's done a ton of new things since the last time we've had him on the podcast, probably like episode low 100s. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's been a couple years since we've talked to Preston. I'm excited to see what he's up to and talk a little bit about how we can work this spring on being healthier and being stronger and all that type of stuff. So that will air after this week's episode. So then we'll record our one where we talk about our whole shooting process and releases and everything like we just said. So we got a good couple weeks of topics ahead.
It's been fun. There's a bunch of guys out there like us that are gear junkies, and we're all just big kids that like to play with toys.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what this is. This is adult toy talk.
And then
not that kind. Not that kind of adult toy. Take it easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Dude, and then after we do that one of our gear talks that needs to happen is our marsupial gear.
Big time.
Where we'll have all our pieces of gear. I don't know if we'll have enough to fit in frame between a bow case and bino packs and all the little other pouches and shit that we have. That will be another episode for sure.
Got a small fortune full of marsupial stuff sitting back over there, so I'm excited to talk about it all.
You would think we have like stock in it or something. It's crazy, man. But no, man, appreciate it, dude. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in and listening and the support. We really appreciate it. Just last week I ended with reach out to a buddy or something like that. Go shoot your bow and work out and spend time with your family. Thanks for tuning in.
Drop some comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Drop some comments. Throw us some questions. Give us some more feedback. We want to know if we're doing good, bad, if we're stupid, if we know what we're talking about. Just give us the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. We want to know.
Yeah. Well, we know we're stupid, but that's what we're told by our wives. But all right, man. Thanks again, everybody. See you next week. Antler up.
I'm going to come, dude.